Blake Day, everyone. We are going to do things a little differently next. We have 4 specific bills that deal with the Blake issue. So the way this hearing is going to go is we are going to get briefing on all 4 of those bills. The prime sponsors will then speak about each of their bills. And then everyone who signed in to testify is going to get 2 minutes. We have removed all the duplicated individuals. So if you have signed in to testify on all 4 bills, you'll get to testify once for 2 minutes on anything you wish related to all 4 of the bills. And that's how we're going to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to be heard. So with that, Joe, please start your briefing on all 4 of the Blake bills.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. For the record, Joe McKittrick, Staff Counsel. As Chair Dhingra indicated, Kevin Black, who's here to the left of me, and I will be providing briefing on all 4 of the bills concerning Blake. First, I'll provide a brief background on the topics addressed in these bills. Then I will discuss how each of these bills responds specifically to the Blake decision, how each bill classifies possession of specific substances, the bill's effects on the drug paraphernalia laws, and how each bill affects the requirement that law enforcement officers make a referral to treatment instead of booking someone into jail. After that, I'll discuss the pretrial diversion program that's created in Senate Bill 5536 and the sentencing and probation requirements of Senate Bill 5467. Finally, Kevin Black will discuss the recommendations of the Substance Use Recovery Advisory Committee in Senate Bill 5624. So, jumping in, as background for these bills, in 2021, the Washington State Supreme Court decided the case of State v. Blake, and in doing so found that the statute prohibiting the possession of controlled substances was unconstitutional. The court reasoned that the statute criminalized even unknowing possession of controlled substances, and that this strict liability crime violated due process. In response to Blake, the legislature passed engrossed Senate Bill 5476, which in part amended the law to prohibit the knowing possession of prohibited substances and made a violation of the law a misdemeanor offense punishable by up to 90 days in jail, a $1,000 fine, or both jail and a fine. These amendments are set to expire July 1st, at which time the statutes will revert back to the language that was in statute prior to Blake that decision found unconstitutional. The legislation passed in 2021 also required that for an individual's first 2 arrests for possession, officers must take the person to available treatment services instead of booking that person into jail. Finally, this legislation created the Substance Use Recovery Services Advisory Committee, or SURSAC, to establish Substance Use Recovery Services Plan. The purpose of the plan is to implement measures aimed at assisting people with substance use disorders in accessing outreach, treatment, and recovery support services that are low barrier, person-centered, and informed by people with lived experiences and that are culturally and linguistically appropriate. So moving on to the bills in front of you today, I'll start by discussing how these bills respond to the Blake decision. And I know it's fairly small on the screen to my left, but on the EBB, you should all have access to a side-by-side comparison comparing different provisions of the 4 bills that we're discussing currently. So as these bills respond to Blake, you can see each responds in some fashion by prohibiting the knowing possession of banned substances. While the other bills prohibit knowing possession in total, Senate Bill 5624 prohibits knowing possession of any amount of the prohibited substances by individuals who are under 21 and prohibits those who are over 21 from possessing more than a personal amount of the prohibited substances. The term personal amount is left undefined in the bill, meaning that what constitutes a personal amount is a question that will be left to litigation. Next, we'll discuss how each of these bills criminally classifies possession. First, Senate Bill 5624 classifies possession of any amount of counterfeit substances, controlled substances, or legend drugs by individuals under 21 as a misdemeanor crime. Under this bill, possession of more than a personal amount of any of those substances is by a person over 21 is classified as also as a misdemeanor. Senate Bills 5536 and 5467 classify possession of counterfeit substances and controlled substances as gross misdemeanor crimes punishable by up to 364 days in jail, a $5,000 fine, or both jail and a fine. These bills classify possession of a legend drug or possession of more than 28 grams of cannabis for an adult or any amount for those under 21 as misdemeanor crimes. And Senate Bill 5035 classifies possession of counterfeit substances as a Class C felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, or both. 5035 maintains that possession of legend drugs or controlled substances or possession of more than 28 grams of cannabis for an adult or any amount for those under 21 as misdemeanor crimes. And next we'll discuss how each of these bills affects the drug paraphernalia statutes. So first, both Senate Bill 5642 and 5536 legalize giving or permitting drug paraphernalia to be given. And this would mean that public health and community-based programs in pharmacies will not risk a Class 1 civil infraction for providing injection, syringe, or smoking equipment as part of an HIV prevention program or similar programs. These bills maintain that selling or permitting drug paraphernalia to be sold is a Class 1 civil infraction. Senate Bills 5642 and 5536 also preempt the field of drug paraphernalia, meaning cities, towns, and other municipalities may only enact local laws and ordinances that are not inconsistent with, not more restrictive than, or that do not exceed the requirements of state law. Senate Bill 5467 and 5035 maintain the current laws related to drug paraphernalia. Next, turning to the referral to treatment, and in provisions of 5536 and 5547, Senate Bills 5536, 5467, and 5035 each repeal RCW 1031-115, which required officers to make a referral to treatment services for a person's first 2 arrests for possession of controlled substances or any of the substances we've previously discussed. Senate Bill 5536 amends the relevant possession statutes to reflect that prosecutors are encouraged but not required to divert cases charged as for possession of controlled substances or related substances to treatment and services. And Senate Bill 5035 amends the possession of counterfeit substances and controlled substances statutes to reflect that prosecutors are encouraged to divert a person's first charge of those offenses. Senate Bill 5624 does not address this issue. And now, before we turn to the treatment provisions of 5536 and 5467, I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of the provisions we've previously discussed.
Thank you so much for that, Joe. Do any of the committee members have any questions for staff? Thank you. And let's move on to the treatment provisions of these bills.
All right. So first, we'll discuss the treatment provisions of Senate Bill 5536. This bill creates a pretrial diversion program for individuals charged with possession. And an arraignment on any of these charges, the judge must advise the defendant of the program, including a full description of its procedures. Defendants may initiate the process of entering diversion by making a motion to the court and agreeing to waive their right to a speedy trial in a trial by jury. If the court grants the motion, the court may continue the hearing and refer the defendant to a substance use disorder program for an assessment. Once the treatment agency has provided that assessment to the court, the prosecutor, and the defendant, including the recommendations for treatment, the court must hold another hearing to determine if the defendant consents to further proceedings in the diversion program. If granted entry into diversion, the defendant will be required to comply with the recommended treatment throughout the diversion program. The program lasts at a minimum of 12 months and can last up to 18 months. It can also be extended past that 18 months if the court finds a good cause reason to do so, including if the treatment program is taking longer than that 18-month timeline. If at any point the court finds the defendant's performance in treatment is unsatisfactory, or if the defendant is convicted of a crime reflecting the defendant's propensity for violence, or is convicted of a felony, the court must schedule the matter for further proceedings, including potential sanctions or termination from the program. If the individual successfully completes the required treatment, the court must dismiss the pending charge or charges. This bill also provides that individuals who have been convicted of possession, who subsequently enroll in and successfully complete substance use treatment, may petition the court to have that conviction vacated. If the court verifies the successful completion of that treatment program, the court must vacate that conviction. And now, before we turn on to the probation requirements of Senate Bill 5467, I'd be happy to answer any questions on this treatment program.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Senator Wagner.
So with respect to 5536, I note also that in the bill summary, there's reference to removing the requirement for public hearings when citing certain essential facilities which amount to treatment centers, either fixed or mobile. And what is the current requirement? Is there a current requirement to have public hearings on these sightings?
And so I may turn that question over to Kevin Black. He's spent a lot more time. This is a recommendation from the SERSAC or the SERSAC committee, and he may be able to give you a more detailed answer than I.
Senator Wagner, can I have you hold that question until we get the briefing from Kevin on the treatment recommendations?
Yes, Madam Chair.
So this is only for the pretrial diversion program that is under Senate Bill 5536. Okay, I don't see any questions on that. Continue.
All right, so moving on to Senate Bill 5467. This bill creates a required sentencing and probation scheme for individuals convicted of certain possession crimes. So first, for individuals convicted of possession of a counterfeit substance, a controlled substance, or a legend drug that is classified as a Schedule II substance, and those are substances that have a high potential for abuse. If the individual does not agree to participate in the treatment as a condition of probation, the court is required to sentence the individual to no less than 45 days in jail. For individuals convicted of possession of a counterfeit substance, a controlled substance, or any legend drug, who also agree to treatment as a condition of probation, the bill requires the court to suspend the statutory maximum sentence for a period of 2 years for a conviction for counterfeit or controlled substances, or for 1 year for a conviction of a legend drug. The court must also require that the person submit to a substance use disorder assessment and comply with the recommended treatment as a condition of probation. While on probation, if it appears that the defendant's performance in treatment is not satisfactory, the court must hold a hearing to determine if sanctions or termination of probation is warranted. For defendants convicted of possession of a controlled substance or counterfeit substance, if at any point the court finds by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant has willfully abandoned treatment or has demonstrated a consistent failure to comply with that treatment, the court must reinstate 45 days of the defendant's suspended sentence and must then terminate probation. If the defendant successfully completes the required treatment and files proof of that completion with the court, upon verification of that successful completion, the court must vacate the convictions in that case. This bill also provides that for individuals who enter treatment after being charged with possession and complete that treatment prior to a conviction on that charge, those individuals may make a motion to the court requesting the charge be dismissed. And if the court can verify the successful completion of treatment, it must grant the motion and dismiss the charges. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of the provisions we've talked about so far.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions for staff? Okay, let's move on to more of the treatment recommendations.
Okay, so I am, for the record, Kevin Black, staff of this committee. I'm going to address just Senate Bill 5624, which enacts recommendations of the SERSAC, or Substance Use Recovery Services Advisory Committee. which did meet 65 times between 2021 and 2022, including meetings of its 4 subcommittees, and submitted a final plan with 16 recommendations to the legislature earlier this month. So your bill report details all of the provisions of this bill. Rather than spend the next 15 minutes going over those, I will give you some high-level highlights and also provisions which have not already been covered by Joe, which are common to the other bills. So some of the things that this bill does is it provides counsel for parents and guardians who are affected by substance use disorders in dependency and child custody cases. It creates a tax exemption for real and personal property used for a recovery residence and funds new recovery residences around the state. It makes opioid overdose reversal medication available for caseworkers of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. It removes the prohibition against giving away drug paraphernalia from a Class 1 civil infraction, as Joe already mentioned. It establishes and funds mobile or fixed site health engagement hubs that would provide opioid treatment services in locations around Washington. It would create a statewide directory of recovery services at the Department of Health. It would convene 2 work groups at the Healthcare Authority, the first to streamline substance use disorder treatment intakes, and the second to make recommendations related to providing a safe, regulated, and tested supply of controlled substances to individuals at risk of drug overdoses. It would also recognize opioid treatment programs as essential public facilities, as highlighted already by Senator Wagner, and take other steps to both expedite and fund the construction costs for siting and placement of opioid treatment facilities around the state. So one of those requirements for citing opioid treatment facilities, particularly relating to methadone, is to have public meetings, and there's language to that effect in the code, which is stricken by the bill. To actually get a full list of current law requirements for starting opioid treatment facilities, I will have to consult with the Healthcare Authority, and I can get you more information. Apart from that, the bill does contain a number of other provisions and details which are gone over in your bill report. There is no fiscal note available at this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Senator Wagner, I hope that helped address your question from earlier.
It did. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for either of our staff? Yes, Senator Cooter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin, could you just give everyone an overview of the categories of people who served on the SURSAC work group, please?
You know, the SURSAC report is right here. I was not staffing this over the summer, and so I don't have that information. I can pull this out of the report for you. I only have a general idea. I'm sorry, Senator.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, we are now going to ask all our prime sponsors to quickly say a few words about their bill, and we are going to start with Senator Padden's bill. Senator Padden?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I just give a little amplified background. On February 25th, 2021, the Supreme Court issued the Blake decision. That was a 5-4 decision overturning the decision of the Court of Appeals and overturning a trial jury decision from Judge Hazel's court in Spokane County. And in their decision, nothing was said about felony in and of itself being unconstitutional. The whole basis of the decision was that knowingly wasn't part of the decision. And this young woman who had drugs in her jeans, the court ruled she didn't knowingly know she had them there. So that simply could be added and would have fixed the whole situation. But of course, the legislature took action as was described by staff. I think there's general agreement that that action didn't work. Number one, there was no way to keep track by different law enforcement agencies of who had been requested to have treatment and who didn't. And I don't know of any cases, maybe there are 1 or 2 that were even ever prosecuted as a misdemeanor. Plus, as indicated, that legislation expires. So we need to take action. And the reason that I think it's important that we continue with a felony is that we need the proper leverage to get these folks into treatment. And frankly, the misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor from a lot of the prosecutors I've talked with is not going to work all that well, certainly not as well as the felony. And the other big advantage of the felony is we already have the judicial infrastructure with our drug courts being in Superior Court. So, I mean, the felony, of course, is in Superior Court. The drug courts have been hugely successful. I thank very much the chair and all of us, I think, have, on a bipartisan way, supported these drug courts. So that is another major reason. There was an individual, she signed in pro on the bill from Spokane, but is unable to testify. She just got back from Washington, D.C., testifying before Congress on fentanyl. Her name is Molly Kane. So we've prepared a YouTube. I'll send it to all the committee members since she is unable to testify. And the YouTube is a little long with so many people ready to testify. But her son died of a fentanyl overdose at 22. And there's so many stories like that. But we have an epidemic out there. And of course, the drug gangs have been emboldened because there has not been any real pushback. In my district, in the far rural eastern end of the district, area of Newman Lake, right up against the Idaho border, we had tagging by drug gangs. And fortunately, the citizens there took action and cleared off the drug gang taggings. But I mean, that's where we're at. I'm sure law enforcement will testify here today, has all sorts of other approaches. We have 13 other co-sponsors besides myself of the legislation, and I urge this committee to give it serious consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Padden. Does anyone have any questions for Senator Padden on his bill 5035? Okay, seeing none, we are now going to move on to Senator Solomon's bill 5467. And Senator Salomon, would you like to please tell us about your bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're witnessing an unacceptable level of open public drug use in many, if not all, of our communities throughout Washington State. We are experiencing a high level of public disorder and a decrease in public safety. For example, a few months ago, I went to pick up my son at his daycare. Two people had taken a couch, set it up on the sidewalk in the middle of a residential street in Seattle, spray painted on it, and were using fentanyl in the daylight on the sidewalk in the middle of a residential area in front of a daycare. If that is not problematic, I don't know what is. Our current referral system, as applied in our communities, effectively only asks people to get help, but has no consequences when those folks don't get help. For example, a judge from Snohomish County explained that since we've implemented the quote-unquote Blake fix that's in place now, 2 people have come seeking treatment, and there's been 1 misdemeanor criminal referral. Obviously, that does not reflect the size of the problem that we see in our communities and that it's not working. We need to address this issue in a more effective way. Addiction is the main factor in this problem. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking based on my 15 years as a public defender, working with thousands of addicted clients, as to what treatment forward law or mechanism can we apply. And I've come up with this bill, 5467. The bill changes the approach that I described because the state needs the ability to get people into treatment programs. And it needs to set a standard where continued public drug use is not an option for people. So this bill is a treatment-forward approach. If one is convicted of possession, the judge cannot sentence to jail, only to treatment. And it's only when somebody refuses to do treatment that jail would be imposed. It therefore is not focused on punishment, but has real consequences for refusing treatment. Also, jail cannot be imposed if treatment is not funded. So if somebody cannot afford the required treatment, they cannot be sent to jail, and treatment has to be available. If treatment is completed before before there's a conviction, the case is dismissed. If treatment is completed after a conviction, the conviction is automatically overturned. This is an attempt to get people into treatment, but it's saying you cannot continue to use on our streets ad nauseum. This bill would also require tox lab results within 30 days, because if we don't get results of drug tests, it's hard to prosecute any charges. And we do understand that will need to be funded by the legislature, and that will be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Senator Salomon on his bill? Okay, seeing none, we are now going to go to our next bill sponsor, who is Senator Robinson. Thank you so much, Senator Robinson, for being here. And welcome to the Law and Justice Committee, and please do tell us about your bill, 5536.
Thank you, Chair Dhingra, members of the committee, Senator June Robinson, representing the 38th Legislative District. I am unexpectedly nervous because I don't usually wade into these waters, and so I'm a little intimidated being before this committee, I have to admit. Why am I taking up this issue, you might ask? I don't usually work in this space. Well, it's because I've heard loud and clear from the communities that I represent that this is an issue that we need to address. And we ourselves, as legislators, set up ourselves for this challenge 2 years ago when we intentionally put a sunset on the bill that we passed in 2021. It's now up to us to deliver policy that can work for the people that we represent. There obviously are a lot of opinions about approaches. That's why you're hearing 4 bills on the same topic today. I believe that the bill that I'm sponsoring, 5536, strikes the right balance between compassion and accountability. And as I've talked to many constituents and stakeholders over the last months on this particular issue, that's what I continuously hear. We need a balance between compassion and accountability. My goal here is to provide options for diversion and treatment and services all along the path for people who are found in possession and interact with our criminal legal system. I've also heard loud and clear that our communities need tools to reinforce their messages about public safety, and that's the accountability, the consequences, if you will, and that as well, I believe, is fully addressed in the proposal that I've put forward before you. Finally, I just want to thank you all for what is going to be careful and probably contentious deliberation on this issue in the days ahead, and I look forward to being a partner with you in that discussion.
Thank you so much, Senator Robinson. We're going to try not to be very intimidating, but Senator Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, please don't be. And I applaud your work on this, but you know I come from local government and I'm sensitive to elements that tend to preempt the authority. So I'm curious why in your bill it was important to take out the public hearing part when it comes to citing medication facilities. And I do understand the distinction between medical treatment and what they call them, where you can just shoot up. I understand that distinction, that there's medical people involved, but why would we take away local government's ability to weigh in and even hold a hearing on the citing of those things?
Thank you for the question. I don't believe I'm taking away the ability. It says it's not mandatory. Further, I will just say that I believe strongly that in order to have most people that I talk to say we need more treatment options for people, that we don't have enough. I agree with that. One of the barriers to more treatment in our communities is reluctance on the part of folks living in those communities to allow facilities to be cited. And you just can't, I don't see how we can do both. not allow things to be cited, but increase opportunities for treatment. And so that was my thinking as I put those points in the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Senator Robinson? Thank you so much, Senator Robinson, for being here with us. And please feel free to bring us more bills to the Law and Justice Committee. We are quite pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I am now going to speak on Senate Bill 5624, which I have prime sponsored. And I want to start off by actually truly thanking the SRSAC committee and the work that they put in. I have been a part of a lot of committees in my life, and I have to say that the discussions, the subgroups, the work that was done through that SRSAC committee was truly tremendous. And I really do want to thank members for that, and I hope to have done justice to bring those recommendations and those voice to the bill. I would like to say that the makeup of that committee, especially since Senator Cooter asked, was with a wide variety of stakeholders. We had the governor's office represented, we had Republican senators, Democratic senators, House representatives, both Republicans and Democrats. We had tribal representation, we had peer recovery services representation, we had the prosecutor's office, we had local government, we had defense, we had health plans, we had law enforcement representation, we had experts who deal with diversion, they were represented. We had University of Washington addiction specialists there, we had youth in recovery, we had individuals in recovery, and the whole point of putting that group together with diverse voices was to really take a look at what is evidence-based, what is best practices, what is data-driven. And here's the question. Is substance use disorder a criminal justice issue, or is it a public health issue? Substance use disorder is a public health issue. Criminal activity that is associated with substance use disorder is criminal activity, and we have to be able to separate the two. And so the question is, what do you do for personal amounts of drug possession cases? Simply drug possession should not be a criminal activity. Thefts that are associated with it, absolutely are criminal activities. Criminal trespass, absolutely. Burglaries, any criminal activity that is associated with drug use, that is a current criminal activity. And so when you take a look at those cases that are solely about drug possession, how do we as a society address that issue? And it's very easy to say this is where the criminal justice system needs to play a role. But I challenge everyone to really think about our civil system. We have diversion programs, and in the last year, every community that has had a program come into that community and provide services, we have heard from everyone that that program has helped. In the fall, when we had our interim hearing in the Yakima area, we had someone, the local sheriff, tell us that one of the benefits he saw was from the LEAD program there, that they were able to make a difference that the criminal justice system couldn't. We passed assisted outpatient treatment to allow for treatment through the civil system. We updated our civil commitment statute to allow for treatment through our civil system. We updated Ricky's law to ensure people can get treatment. And when we take a look at what is happening across the world, that is where people are moving to, because that is what the data tells us is how we treat individuals who are struggling with substance use disorder. And so the question I would like all of us to really think about is, if your loved one was struggling, what would be the process that you would like for that person to undergo? And I leave you with that. I'm happy to answer any questions. Seeing none, we are going to go to our first testifiers, and we are just going to go down the list. We're going to start with Rod Higgins, followed by Mark Johnson, followed by Ron Wiesen and Rick Kuss. Okay, it's going to be a combination of remote and in person. So if you're in person, feel free to come up right when your name is called. Okay, please begin. And it's a 2-minute timer. I'm going to ask everyone to please stick with the timer. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Deputy Mayor Rod Higgins, representing the city of Spokane Valley, the 9th largest city in the state. Today, I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 5035, which restores consequences for those possessing controlled substances and who may be suffering from substance abuse. I want to thank Senator Padden for sponsoring this important legislation. The legislature's temporary policy of requiring an individual to be referred to treatment twice before they can be arrested for possession of drugs has essentially led to a legalization of drugs. I urge you to act this session to establish consequences. Those suffering from substance abuse are not getting directed into treatment. And for community members, it has led to the open use of controlled substances in our streets. It's ironic and just wrong that you can be arrested for being drunk in public, but not for shooting up heroin. The city of Spokane Valley encourages you to restore order, whether it's through reestablishing possession of controlled substances as a felony, as proposed in Senate Bill 5035, or establishing a gross misdemeanor, as is done in some other proposals before you. But there must be consequences. Those consequences serve as a strong motivator for an individual to get the treatment they need to break the cycle of substance abuse. Thank you for holding today's public hearing and for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mark Johnson.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Mark Johnson with the Washington Retail Association. Public safety, retail theft, organized retail crime are my members' #1 issue this legislative session. The safety of our customers, the safety of our employees is paramount to our retail members. We applaud this committee for bringing out a suite of bills that take a look at this very real problem. Organized retail crime rings prey on folks that are suffering from a substance abuse addiction and also those that are suffering from mental illness. And so I really appreciate that you're looking at the whole array of different prongs to address these very real problems out there. Just locking them up in jail is not the solution. They need to break the cycle, and when you get them off of a substance that they're addicted to, or you treat their mental illness, you help break that cycle and you make it more difficult for these theft rings to recruit these individuals to commit the crimes in my members' stores. So we applaud the committee for going forward down this very difficult path. Swift and decisive action is needed now, and we encourage you to move this legislation along. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And while we wait for Ron Wiesen and Rick Kuss, we will have Nadine Woodward, Craig Mydall, Andrew Rolls, and LaDon Lindy. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Ron Wiesen, Chair of the Skagit County Commissioners, and we support House Bill 5467 and other bills that support improvements to our community. Skagit County has seen little to no success under the current law. The current process of providing someone with substance use disorders with treatment options, information, and walking away has proven very ineffective. Most of the time, the person with substance use disorders does not follow up or seek treatment. There is also a lack of clarity in the law on retention of evidence and testing of substance at the time of diverting to treatment. There is currently no statewide or countywide database to record the number of times a person has been referred to treatment by law enforcement. As a result of the current law, we have seen an increase in the people living with substance use disorders in our county, which has increased homelessness. We have seen homelessness encampments pop up throughout the county. Substance use disorders is prevalent in these communities, along with controlled substance delivery. Crimes against persons like assault and rape often go unreported in these encampments. The areas surrounding the encampments also have seen a big increase in crime like theft, burglary, and other property crimes. These encampments and properties pose a quality of life issue for everyone and a life safety issue for those living within them. We believe the treatment for substance use disorders is the best option for someone to regain their lives, become healthy, and be a productive member of our society. We also believe that having drug possession laws give law enforcement the opportunity to get people into the theoretical courts and other treatment options that will help them to regain their lives. The new laws can also provide accountability and consequences for those who choose not to seek treatment or to help regain their lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up will be Rick Kuss. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Rick Kuss. I am a Kitsap County resident and a retired Navy nuclear officer with a master's degree in criminal justice and current PhD student. My training and experience has led me to become an expert in root cause analysis as well as the criminal justice system. I believe that the possession of drugs recklessly endanger innocent bystanders, so it is indeed a criminal justice issue. Recently, with the Blake decision struck down and Senate Bill 5476 making possession a misdemeanor with little or no enforcement or diversions, the same time across the country, fentanyl saw growing exponential use in the United States. To counter this, legislation took no action. From August of 2021 to August of 2022, there was a 12.35% increase of reported drug overdose deaths in Washington, which is above average in the United States, according to the National Center for Health Statistics. The data shows the increase in death rates due to these hard drugs, but doesn't communicate what I've seen over the last year since I've retired. I've been walking around homeless encampments, getting to know people and serving. And when I see that, I have to avoid stepping on needles. I see a complete lack of sanitation. I see fentanyl being smoked near the trails where kids are walking on. Talking with some of the homeless, they wish the drug users would be locked up not only for their own safety, but the safety of others, for the reckless endangerment. At night, it's noted over by the Salvation Army in Bremerton that there are knife fights and fits of rage that exist, like the drug users are no longer human. Drug users feel like they're trapped, and when they get treatment to go to a confined space, it doesn't work out, so they choose to leave and choose to go back to their life of drugs. Many of their friends and acquaintances are now dead due to drug use. Could this have been prevented? Could one life have been saved if there was tougher accountability in crimes? The data and the human contact definitely suggests so. That is why I support these bills. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are now going to hear from Nadine Woodward, and while we are waiting for our remote testifiers, I'll just say we're going to have in person with Amy Aucklander and Jim Farrell. So go ahead, Ms. Woodward.
Thank you, Chair Dhingra, Ranking Member Padden, and committee members. I'm here to support Senate Bill 5467. As mayor of Spokane, I hear every day from individuals and businesses about the rampant drug use that they witness outside of their businesses, downtown with their families and in their neighborhoods. Just last week, I was in a meeting with the owner of a downtown daycare who described in graphic detail how children watch people inject drugs while using the windows of that daycare as mirrors. Instances like these are not rare. It's damaging our downtown core and our neighborhoods. Cities and counties need the tools to protect the public and to hold individuals accountable while they are going through treatment. And Senate Bill 5467 helps us do that. The bill provides accountability and justice for victims of substance abuse, where the current interim laws do not. The bill provides balance for both public safety and public health impacts of widespread drug use in the state of Washington. It prioritizes treatment, which is so important, and has the necessary tools to compel individuals into and then successful completion of that treatment. We are in the middle of a drug crisis in our state and in our country. Treatment must be part of the solution, and sometimes people just need a nudge. This bill, I believe, balances the different approaches, and it provides both a carrot and a stick necessary to ensure the completion of treatment. On an issue that, as you've all mentioned, is proven to be so contentious, I urge you to move this very bipartisan bill forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Craig Meidel.
Good morning, Chair Dhingra, Ranking Member Padden, members of the committee. My name is Craig Meidel, Chief of Police for the Spokane Police Department. I also am testifying in support of Senate Bill 5467. This weekend, I looked at data from the Center for Disease Control, and it showed the dates of August 21 through August 22, a nationwide overdose death rate of 3.3%. During that same time period in Washington State, overdose deaths have increased 16.87%, according to the CDC. That's more than a five-fold increase in Washington State in overdose deaths when compared to the rest of the nation. Center for Disease Control numbers predict that over 100,000 people will have died last year based on their predicted numbers due to overdose deaths. In Spokane County, the medical examiner reported that in 2021, the latest report we have, there was a 285% increase in fatal drug overdoses compared to 2020. When the 2022 numbers are finalized in the coming months, we expect that that trend is going to continue. We have a crisis in this state that is only getting worse. Senate Bill 5476 strikes a balance between treatment and accountability. It allows government to keep their communities safer by encouraging those struggling with addiction to seek treatment, and it rewards those who make a good faith effort by giving the courts flexibility in responding to those who try but fail, and further allows complete removal of the charge from their records for those who successfully complete treatment. As the mayor said, our state is in a crisis with those suffering from addiction, and much is at stake. I encourage you to pass this bill and move Washington forward in responding with compassion and accountability to those suffering from addiction. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Rolls?
Committee Chair Dhingra and members of the committee, good morning. I'm Andrew Rawls with the Downtown Spokane Partnership. I'll focus my time on recounting a story I heard last week from one of our members about an interaction he had a few weeks back. At that time, highs were reaching the low teens here in downtown Spokane. Our association member, Josh. Josh appeared to be in his early 30s, and he was huddled in the door of a bar entrance. He was wearing ragged winter clothes, but his hands and face were uncovered in spite of the temperatures because he was working on cooking his fentanyl tabs on a sheet of foil. His exposed hands and face were a pale gray verging on a bluish shade, and so the business owner asked him if he was okay. Josh affirmed he was, and then launched into a philosophical discussion about legalizing drug use. The bar owner engaged with him on his points, but Josh then turned his thoughts to what he thought the business owner was really after. "You want me to get out of here, right?" he asked. "Well, yeah, I do, but this weather's going to kill you if the drugs don't." Josh's rejoinder was, "Well, call the cops, but there's nothing they can do about it." And then the bar owner asked him about the bruises on Josh's face. He said, "I got beat up yesterday by my drugs." The bar owner closed off the conversation by encouraging him to consider getting off the path of self-destruction he's so self-evidently on. The policies of the state of Washington are imbalanced and leaving destruction in their wake. For people like Josh, it seems like we've decided to wash our hands of him and the tyranny that he suffers under. The right policy provides justice system engagement, but also gives a path fully out of the justice system for those who beat addiction. 5467 gets these points right, and I hope it will gain the committee's support. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. And while our mayors are next, on board will be Jeff Baker and Ann Anderson. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Amy Okerlander, Mayor of the City of Duval and Secretary of the Association of Washington Cities Board, here testifying in support of both as Senate Bill 5467 and Senate Bill 5536 on behalf of the Association of Washington Cities. Thank you, Chair Dhingra and the committee for hearing these bills, and thank you to Senator Robinson and Senator Salomon for their work to draft the bills and for engaging with cities in that process. AWC identified responding to the Blake decision as one of our main legislative priorities for 2023 after hearing from cities across the state that the current approach to drug possession isn't working. The current system requiring law enforcement to refer someone to treatment programs twice before they can refer them to prosecution isn't effective. There is no way to track these referrals, and there is no accountability for individuals who don't take advantage of treatment options. AWC supports a Blake response approach that includes making possession of an illegal drug a gross misdemeanor while focusing on diversion options that encourage individuals to participate in treatment programs in lieu of criminal penalties. In a recent poll of 500 likely voters from across the state, 69% indicated their support for drug treatment, but that there should be consequences for those who refuse treatment. Those 69% agreed that if people break the law and refuse treatment, they should be held accountable and be subject to fines and jail time. Both Senate Bill 5467 and Senate Bill 5536 take this approach, providing clear criminal penalties and accountability while focusing on providing diversion options to get people into treatment programs. We think that both bills have good approaches and that it makes sense to combine the best parts of each bill to have both pretrial and deferred sentence style diversion options. For most cities, this approach will require more resources and funding to administer, more staffing and training for our public defenders, prosecutors, probation officers, and other court staff. It will also require further state investment in community-based behavioral health care treatment programs. We ask the legislature to provide funding to help cities with these new costs so that we can successfully administer this approach to drug possession. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Dhingra and members of the committee. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Jim Farrell. I'm the mayor of Federal Way, and I've been mayor there for 9 years now. I'm here to testify in favor of both 5536 and 5467. As the mayor of a city of over 100,000 residents and the leader of a police department, I can tell you that the current law is simply not working and needs to be corrected. I believe both 5536 and 5467 both provide the right direction for our state. Specifically, 5536 would eliminate the two prior, and I believe both actually do, will eliminate the two prior referrals and warnings, which essentially has created a state of de facto legalization in our communities. I also strongly support pretrial diversions, which incentivizes drug treatment, which, if completed, would and rightfully should result in dismissals of cases. I think Chair Dhingra had it exactly right, thinking about what do we want from people that we are close to and that we care about, and I think this really incentivizes getting those kinds of dismissals. You know, the use of these dangerous drugs really does fuel and lead to other crimes, as was mentioned previously. Burglaries, robberies, thefts, car theft. It really increases the levels of crimes that are really unacceptable in our community. We must bring back some clarity and common sense to our drug laws, which it looks like you're working hard, very hard to do so. But this is not about the two bills that we're in favor of aren't about locking people up. It's about making sure that you've got some sort of incentivizing and really breaking the vicious cycle of addiction. And unfortunately, for people in the grips of this addiction, we need laws like this in order to bring back some sort of clarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And while we hear from Jeff Baker and Ann Anderson next, on deck we'll have Heather Kelly, Kilabanta Green, and Joshua Wallace. Go ahead, Jeff. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Jeff Baker. I am a recovering addict, and I was asked by my local commissioner to speak on these matters. I give you a little background. I was addicted to drugs at an early age. I've been through Maple Lane, Echo Glen, Nacelle are some of the things, and the Yakima County jail. Okay. I changed my life at the age of 26 as a result of stiff consequences for my actions. I'm speaking on behalf of both 5035, I'm pro for that, and I'm also, I don't think that's going to go, so 5467. I really like what Senator Padden had to say about, the Supreme Court didn't have an issue with felonies. So I just want to share something, my time in the county jail, it took me almost 6 months before my mind came back to me to make an honest decision to want to change my life. I believe treatment's good. I've been through treatment. I've been through treatment 3 or 4 times. Treatment is good. But if it's the first option, I'm not sure how many people are going to actually change the first option. Jail can and does help people. Like I said, I was in there 6 months before I actually started to get my emotions and everything under order. So the other thing is, when I was out of jail, I got chances to bail out. When I was out on bail, I actually got more charges. So my life got worse because of the being out on bail. The 2 times, the 2 opportunities for treatment before you actually get jail time, I see that there is a possible problem with that. That's really all I want to say. I thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Baker. Next is Ann Anderson. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Ann Anderson. I am here with representing the Washington State Narcotic Investigators Association. We appreciate the thought that you put into addressing the Blake decision with considerations to incentivize treatment, speed up time for individuals to get well, and keep our communities safe. We are supportive of a policy that, in addition to what other members will share with you, consider a few of the following items. One is a suspended sentence, allowing a guilty plea as early as arraignment with suspended sentence pending completion of an assessment and drug treatment program would speed this process up, getting people into treatment faster and allowing them more resources. Aligning legend drug possession with other drug possessions and making it a gross misdemeanor as well. I don't think there's less harm that comes from legend drugs than from others. With a 700% increase in overdose fatalities and dramatic increases in gun and human trafficking in Oregon, I feel like we have strong evidence that personal use is probably not the best option in what we want to bring here. I also think it would be fantastic to include language that would create metrics of success for treatment so that we can be accountable, make sure that everything is working. On a personal note, Senator Dhingra, you asked what we would want for our loved ones, and I have experience with this and can say that what I would want for my loved one is for them to have an opportunity to show that they can be held accountable and that they can get better, because I think at the heart of compassion is that accountability. So again, thank you very much for your consideration of this. We really do appreciate you addressing this.
And thank you for sharing and being here. Okay, and while we wait for our online testifiers to come, I would just like to remind everyone who's online, you have to accept the prompt to testify, and then you'll be promoted to being a panelist. So please go ahead and do that. Please start.
Up next?
Yes, you're next.
Okay, thank you. My name is Heather Kelly, and I'm the Criminal Justice Issue Chair for the League of Women Voters of Washington and the President of the League of Seattle-King County. I'm here on behalf of our members to ask you to support Senate Bill 5624. This is the right pathway for Washington because it rejects a punitive one-size-fits-all response to drug possession and instead focuses resources on prevention and life-saving treatment. The League has long been a stakeholder in this discussion. In 1991, the League of Seattle studied substance use disorder and developed a public policy position that supported a public health approach to addressing drug abuse. In 2000, the King County Bar Association began the Drug Policy Project, and the League was a part of that as well. Again, the project approach to controlled substance use, stressing a shift of resources to research, education, prevention, and treatment as an alternative to the continued use of criminal sanctions. In September 2003, we finally published a summary of those conclusions in Is It Time to End the War on Drugs? And that was almost 20 years ago. Now, almost 40 years after the League of Seattle first studied this issue, the evidence supporting a public health approach to substance use has only grown stronger. We heard the incredible range of skills, expertise, and experience among SURSAC's members, so I'm here to ask you to just let them lead us. We're out of time for further study. You can make policy based on how we think people should act, or you can legislate based on what we know actually changes behavior. People need to feel supported by this legislature. Senate Bill 5624 achieved that. Thank you so much, Chair Dhingra, for bringing this bill forward, and thank you to the committee for your time.
Thank you so much. Caleb Green.
Good morning, Chair Dhingra and committee members. I'm testifying in support of SB 5624 on behalf of the University of Washington. I'm Professor Caleb Green. I'm faculty in the School of Medicine, and I'm the director of the Center for Community-Engaged Drug Education, Epidemiology, and Research. I was appointed to the SURSA committee and served as co-chair of the treatment subcommittee. Taken together, the SURSA recommendations will make substantial changes and improvements for prevention, treatment, recovery support, and harm reduction in our state. Community services for people who use drugs are not evidence-based and not desired by the people who need them most. Research evidence should drive our work, not anecdote. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to fix this broken non-system. A major recommendation from my subcommittee is the creation of health engagement hubs for people who use drugs. This draws from the model of care in New York State, as well as our research across Washington State that shows this model is extremely appealing to people with opioid and stimulant use disorder. It supports engagement and it reduces substance use. Health hubs are easily accessed in community-based settings and provide a broad array of healthcare and treatment services, including overdose and infectious disease prevention services and supplies. We've shown that treatment does not need to be coerced, nor the law used as leverage. ESB 5476 cannot be judged a failure since effective, accessible models of care were not launched in parallel to all the referral processes. If you think about the crisis of untreated substance use disorder and drug overdoses and the proliferation of extremely cheap fentanyl, we need to make treatment and related health services easier to get than a $3 pill off the internet. That is why health hubs are so vital to supporting recovery, reducing deaths, and reducing the chaos in people's lives and in their communities. Other SRSA recommendations similarly aim to dramatically improve services and access to care, as well as enhance our workforce. Please move forward with the legislation based upon the recommendations of the SRSA committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And while we wait for the next one, on deck, we have Lisa Dugard, David Hayes, Brianne Beggs. Go ahead, Joshua Wallace.
Thank you, Madam Chair and esteemed members of the Law and Justice Committee. My name is Joshua Wallace. I am the CEO of Peer Washington, and I identify as a person thriving in long-term recovery from co-occurring challenges, and I'm testifying today in favor of Senate Bill 5624. I see 5035 in my name. I'm on that bill. How would you feel about an intervention model with an established 75% reduction in arrest recidivism for drug-related crimes? Would it impact your decision on how we can address this community impact in a meaningful way? First, a bit about me. I'm a person thriving in long-term recovery from co-occurring challenges for just over 17 years. I spent 6 years of my life on the streets of Seattle as an IV drug user with untreated mental illness. I was a good kid, raised to believe just say no to drugs, who endured almost daily, severe physical and sexual trauma. To understand the disease of addiction is to understand the genetic and environmental contributors to the chemical imbalances in the brain that characterize the uncontrollable compulsion to use a substance to achieve mental wellness for even a short period of time. Society told me not to talk about my abuse and the resulting mental illness. In fact, it taught me to feel shame and to keep it secret over seeking help. With one suicide attempt under my belt and a dwindling desire to live, all my logical defenses against drug use were meaningless. I needed help. The drug I took was the first treatment for what ailed me. In fact, it would later be the pharmaceutical drug prescribed for one of the conditions that I have. The stigma of behavioral health, abuse, and seek help, but to keep it a deep, painful secret eating at me. After 6 years of homeless IV drug use with untreated mental health, I was able to find recovery after the civil possession charge landed me in drug court. Peer work is essential to engaging individuals in their own recovery, thereby reducing recurrence of the disease. Intrinsic motivation always works better than the force and shame. In King County, we have been working with the BHS ASO to track the impact of our peer work and have been able to show a 75% reduction in arrest recidivism when people engage in our program. So I urge you to pass 5624 so we can focus on reducing the crisis through treatment rather than continuing to invest in the cyclical nature of criminalizing a disease. Thank you.
Thank you. David Hayes.
Senator Dhingra, all members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dave Hayes. I'm a 29-year law enforcement lieutenant with up in Snohomish County. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs in favor of 5536. And the combination of these bills that it's going to take to develop some really good public policy. So I'm going to express a couple of the concerns or directions that we feel we should go with this policy. WACOPS wishes to be a productive part of the conversation, and that will lead to meaningful solutions in this area. I thank Senator Robinson for bringing the proposal and the other bill sponsors for trying to be a positive part of this as well. With the different trying to fix the Blake decision, we feel that a combination of the elements between the four bills is probably the best path forward. We believe that the best path to treatment and recovery includes an incentive for individuals through the courts and we don't believe that leaving the people in the spin cycle of addiction is compassionate, and we wish to have the shortest path to recovery. With that, we encourage our legislators to adopt a policy that would provide incentive through a deferred or suspended sentence and include a probation officer in these solutions as well to track the success or failure of the individual through the courts. And that the path to eventual recovery should likely lead to dismissal of the charge. There must be consequences for the individual's failure or refusal to get well. That's why we appreciate Senator Padden's approach. But we also recognize that recovery is very personal, and it sometimes takes more times than just once. With that, we're encouraged by the Senate's efforts to address this matter, and we offer our expertise and to be a positive influence in this process. I encourage you, committee, to push this bill forward and come up with a good, positive solution that results in good drug policy. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Next will be Breen Beggs, and then we'll follow by Lisa Dugard.
Thank you, Chair Dhingra and committee members. I am Breen Beggs. I'm the Spokane City Council President, and I'm testifying on behalf of the City of Spokane's legislative agenda, which, if having to choose between a criminal option, we strongly support Senate Bill 5536. And the reason that we support that bill as opposed to 5467 is that the diversion is focused on pretrial. That is much cheaper and has fewer negative impacts for the community. I was speaking with our court administrator, and it costs a minimum of $5,000 to prosecute a misdemeanor, usually about $10,000. Costs $130 a day for jail. If we can get these diverted before trial and all the costs of prosecution and before any type of sentences or minimum sentences, that saves us a lot of money. And it's already been said by AWC, but this is going to be a huge lift for cities. We are not used to prosecuting this, and it's going to cost us a lot of money, and we hope that you'll be providing us funds and resources along the way, from everything from public defenders to judges to interpreters to probation officers. Spokane is nationally recognized as a leader in problem-solving courts. That's why we like diversion. We have a community court for downtown nuisances. We have a veterans court. We have a chronic DUI court. We have a new domestic violence court. And what we've found in that is the reoffense rates are so much lower than traditional incarceration. And it saves money, it improves lives, and it improves the community. So we strongly support diversion, and we're opposed to the mandatory minimums in 5467. Given the way our system disproportionately arrests people on race, that's just going to multiply that. And finally, I just wanted to express my personal appreciation for the SURSAC work, and I hope in the future that we'll pursue that further as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Good morning, Senator and members of the committee. I'm co-executive director of PDA. We helped design and manage LEAD programs in King County. LEAD is a framework for pre-booking diversion, not pre-trial, but prior to jail booking and prosecution. Diversion to long-term case management and care coordination for people with violations due to behavior related to drug use, mental illness, or poverty. We provide technical support for communities building similar models around Washington state and nationally. As well, in 2020, we also developed the Just Care model for response to people living unsheltered in encampments. Continuously since 1998, my organization and I have fought to replace the war on drugs with a robust community-based care model that addresses real harms related to drug use and the drug economy. We are mindful of the enormous body of evidence that courts and jails are generally not effective places to address drug issues. However, we also recognize that it's not advisable system with no system, or we run the risk of creating nostalgia for the system that almost everyone recognized a few years ago needed to go, because at least it was doing something. No law can ensure that as a state, we safely and effectively transition to a new paradigm of care-based responses to drug-related issues. To accomplish that, we have to build and retain public confidence that this is a good and viable change. What we need now, however, is a legal framework that makes this shift possible and doesn't make it harder. I see Senate Bill 5536 as having the potential to be that legal framework. There are two key strengths of 5536. The first is one that I don't think was focused on in the staff report, but 50 not assume that most people will or should be prosecuted. It continues to authorize and support pre-booking diversion and community-based care strategies. Secondly, including facilities that provide care for
have you wrap up, please? Thank you.
As essential facilities in the comprehensive planning process, as SB 5536 does, is a great step. People have to have places to go if we're serious about people getting care. Overall, 5536 offers a framework that continue to improve public safety and individual health and well-being. I'm hopeful we can work together to fine-tune the framework in coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up will be Mary Lou Polly, followed by Dana Ralph, Chad Enright, and Armando Pavanoi. Okay, go ahead. And the people in person can come up to the seats. Go ahead, Mayor.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, Chair Dhingra and committee members. I am Mary Lou Polly, the mayor of the city of Issaquah, and I'm here this morning to testify in supporting Senate Bill 5536. I know there are several bills being considered this morning that propose policies to help individuals who are suffering from substance use disorder. I believe Senate Bill 5536 is the best option for two main reasons. First, the city of Issaquah has a therapeutic court model, and we see the policies outlined in 5536, specifically the pretrial diversion, as aligning very well with our current court practices response to behavioral health needs in our community. This bill will promote the city's efforts to remove the barriers that people face in obtaining services and ultimately to restore them to self-sufficiency and reduce recidivism. Second, we believe this bill provides the clarity and guidance for law enforcement to be able to help individuals in our public rights-of-ways and city parks that are struggling with substance use disorder. There is a reference in Section 8 of the bill that evaluation and treatment for an individual that is found to be indigent must be provided at no cost. We don't believe it is the intent, but we would appreciate the clarification that cities would not bear that cost if an individual is not covered by state insurance. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify on this important topic and all the hard work you've been doing. I believe this is one of the most important policies for this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mayor Ralph.
Good morning, Chair Dhingra, Ranking Member Padden, committee members. My name is Dana Ralph, and I am the mayor for the city of Kent. Every single day, I hear from my community that addressing possession and use of controlled substances will be the most important and impactful thing that you all can do this session. Our current system is failing. It's failing those suffering from addiction. It's failing our businesses who find drug users on their doorsteps. It's failing their employees who are tasked with cleaning up needles and foil every morning when they come into work. It's failing our families who are afraid to bring their kids downtown into our parks. It's failing our youth who observe that there is no consequence to these behaviors. Please do not adjourn this session without passing a bill. We believe that both Senate Bill 5467 and 5536 would be a significant improvement over where we are today. Thank you, Senators Robinson and Salomon, for bringing them forward. Both of these bills recognize that individuals are not likely to choose treatment unless there are consequences to their addiction. There are positive elements in both bills, and we hope that you will integrate them for the best bill possible. As you do this work, I would offer one comment. Senate Bill 5536 includes an option for a pretrial diversion. While I'm supportive of providing individuals with an opportunity to access treatment rather than the criminal justice system, to make this model successful, this bill needs to be revised. As currently drafted, if an individual chooses pretrial treatment and does not complete that treatment, prosecution would occur. This prosecution could take up to 2 years, and much of the information needed to prosecute could be stale and outdated. Given those challenges, it's more likely than not that prosecution would not occur and there would be no consequences. Without modification, this option would look too familiar to what we have today, giving someone who's addicted encouragement to get treatment but no consequence. We must acknowledge that there's a massive impact of drugs that they have on our community, both of those for those dealing with addiction and the larger community dealing with the impacts of those using those drugs. We need tools to get individuals into treatment and keep our communities and our kids safe. Compassion and accountability can exist together. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And while we get ready to hear from Chad Enright, on deck we're going to have Armando Pavoni, Dan Templeman, James McMahon, and Barbara Tolbert. Go ahead, Chad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Chad Enright. I'm the Kitsap County Prosecutor. I am here on behalf of WAPA, the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. I was also a member of the SURSAC, and I think Senate Bill 5624 correctly sets forth that committee's recommendations. I was not in support of the decriminalization part of those recommendations. And so I do want to speak with you, though, primarily on 5536 and 5467. I think they are both good starts. I think they are focused on treatment rather than punishment, and I think that's the way that we need to move forward. However, I think both bills are perhaps too focused on that. They are focused on what I would call the first-time offenders or our low-risk offenders. These are folks that have often in the past been overpunished in the criminal justice system. But my office, what we've done over the years is we've diverted a lot of those, and it's been very successful. These bills, however, I don't think they address the repeat offenders or those who commit other more serious crimes along with drug possession. Somebody who commits a sexual assault and is in possession of drugs, a firearm charge and is possession of drugs, domestic violence and in possession of drugs. Treatment and diversion may not be good options for those individuals. 5467 is limited to courts of limited jurisdiction. That's problematic because felony charges can't be adjudicated in those courts. And so if we have a situation of count 1, robbery, count 2, possession of a controlled substance, either the prosecutor doesn't charge the possession of a controlled substance or we're charging 2 cases in separate courts, which becomes even more problematic when we start bringing in our municipal courts. 5536 also puts a lot of the power of diversion in the hands of the court. That is, frankly, I believe that may be a separation of powers issue. I do think that the plans to vacate convictions is a very good step forward, and I'm asking that those remain in whatever bill this committee sets forth.
Thank you so much. And next up is Mayor Pavoni. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Dhingra. Good morning. My name is Armando Pavoni, Mayor of the City of Renton. I appreciate there are many different positions for moving forward on this difficult issue, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'd like to share some of the problems we see in my city. In a recent emphasis patrol in our downtown, Renton police officers made outreach to 350 people experiencing addiction. Less than 10 were open to treatment referral. That's just 2.8%. And we still don't know if any of those 10 met with a provider. There's just no follow-up. Those suffering from addiction refuse treatment, ultimately leaving them in the same, often unsafe environment. Our residents and business owners see this cycle repeat. They worry for the safety and health of their community, and they fear it might never be resolved. These incidents and many others have led to significant spike in public calls for police response to open drug use and an overwhelming increase in concern from our community members. We need to support our community and those suffering from these very treatable problems. But let's be clear, the people using these substances are sick and deserve help and support. I and our City Council believe that providing sufficient resources to assist individuals in need is critical to the ultimate success for this effort. Likewise, we support actions to ensure that individuals take advantage of available treatments. The key to this working is through accountability of the gross misdemeanor sentence in our court system. We support the deferral of any sentence for offenders who enter a court-approved treatment program. Those who complete the court requirements, including a substance abuse assessment, deserve to have any related convictions removed from their record. Therefore, we support the efforts of Senate Bill 5536 and Senate Bill 5467, knowing there's still more work to be done. Thank you for allowing me to testify this morning.
Thank you. Go ahead. I believe it's Chief Templeman next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair Dhingra and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan Templeman. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Everett, and I'm here today to testify in support of both 5467, but specifically this morning, 5536. I'd like to start by thanking Senator Robinson for not only hearing the concerns raised by members of our communities and law enforcement, but for truly listening and working with all groups to seek a solution that we hope will provide the greatest benefit for both our residents and those suffering from substance use disorder. Since the passage of engrossed Senate Bill 5476 in 2021, complaints of open-air drug use and associated quality of life crimes have skyrocketed. On an almost daily basis, I'm hearing from residents and businesses frustrated by the conditions they are seeing on our streets, which is a result of many factors, including our current law. What we are doing today is not working, and it's time to bring some level of accountability back into the system. Prior to the passage of our existing law, our community outreach and enforcement team in Everett, which includes embedded social workers, experienced a higher degree of success in getting individuals to agree to treatment. Out of 398 referrals for treatment made by Everett officers since engrossed Senate Bill 5476 went into effect, I'm aware of only one person who voluntarily accepted the offer for treatment. Returning the option of arrest to our officers and deputies on the street more effectively creates the opportunity for someone to accept services and begin their road to recovery than the current system. While I fully support Senate Bill 5536, it is my hope that as this bill makes its way through the process, that enhancements can be made, particularly in the area of pre versus post-conviction diversion. One of the complaints I've heard for years is the revolving door system, the revolving door of the criminal justice system. Arrest, prosecute, incarcerate, release, and repeat is simply not effective. I continue to support language that strongly incentivizes treatment over jail, similar to that contained in Senate Bill 5467. So I believe it will provide the greatest opportunity to actually break this cycle and make a lasting impact on public safety in our communities. So in closing, I'd like to support Senate Bill 5436. My appreciation, Senator Robinson, and thank you all for your service to our communities.
Thank you. Go ahead, James. And on deck, after James McMahon, we are going to have Larry Jefferson, Jason Schwartz, and Sarah Hudson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm James McMahon, Policy Director with the Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, testifying in support of Senate Bill 5536, 5647, and 5035, and opposed to Senate Bill 5624. Our experiment with effective legalization of drugs has failed. Our prisons were never filled only with simple possession cases that now our parks and our sidewalks are. Treatment providers tell us that caseloads are down, while we've never had more overdose deaths in Washington. It is neither humane nor compassionate to leave those with a substance use disorder to suffer to their own devices or to require police to stand by and simply do nothing. We appreciate that Senate Bill 5647 leverages treatments. It addresses crime lab shortages, and a judge can only require somebody to go to jail if they refuse treatment. We appreciate Senate Bill 5536, but we think it's a lost opportunity to leverage the criminal justice system to get those into treatment. We are concerned about the preemption on paraphernalia. We think that simple misdemeanor option is another layer that our officers can take advantage of. We don't think the language in Section 9 on the vacation of bills is linked in any time manner, and we'd like to see some language change there. In Section 12, we wonder why it's specific only to opioid treatments. Our members, frankly, prefer the felony option that Senate Bill 5035 presents. We think that also there's a lost opportunity to leverage treatment there, but we think those three bills perhaps could be consolidated into one that enhances public safety. Finally, we do oppose decriminalization as proposed in Senate Bill 5624, and I will note in my last 15 seconds, Madam Chair, California has a similar provision to the personal use amount and seems to be in continuous litigation since about 1963 through the present day on that. So we would not advise that as an option.
Thank you. And next up is Mayor Talbert while we wait for our in-person panel to sit. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here to speak in support of Robinson's Bill 5536. I think it serves as a meaningful redress to Washington's July 1st deadline of addressing the Blake issue. It also serves to prioritize and incentivize treatment, which using the criminal justice system as a recourse for those who refuse or abandon treatment. And we think that with treatment as the priority of the bill, it not only recognizes the public health, but also the public safety impacts of widespread drug use in our state and in our communities. Senate Bill 5536 achieves the goal of productive drug reform, and it allows lawmakers an opportunity to implement meaningful changes in our community to continue to work on this bill and pass it through committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Larry Jefferson, and I am Director of Public Defense for the state of Washington. I'm testifying in favor of 5624. In general, we favor decriminalization. And the reason for this from the Office of Public Defense is that public defense has never been fully funded across the state. It will take money and resources to fund the district court and municipal courts. Right now, I did a survey of jurisdictions that need attorneys right now. We need 73, 44 for felony cases and 28 for district court cases. That's only a symptom of what we need. We think that this should be addressed as a public health issue and not a criminal issue. The other thing that seems to befuddle me is that I would argue that a person who has a needle sticking out of their arm and in a public place is gravely disabled. We already have laws that allow people to be picked up. I've done it myself. I'm a parent. I've used Ricky's Law myself. I don't understand why officers are not using the civil laws that we have. My presumption is that we haven't put in enough money into being able to civilly commit people who are gravely disabled. What we're concerned about is people being on the street and taking up our valuable parks and that sort of devastation that we don't need to see. We already have laws to help us do that. We just need to fund them. And so what I'm saying is I don't want more lawyers for money for this. But if you do, fully fund public defense all over the state so that we don't have justice by geography. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Hudson. I'm testifying on behalf of the Washington Defender Association and the Washington Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Thank you, Chair Dhingra, and members of the committee for being here today and your work on this issue. Washington Defender Association provides support to public defenders statewide, primarily through training and case assistance. I, in particular, am an attorney who advises about the consequences of convictions on someone's immigration matters, as well as being a former public defender. What I would like to talk about today is the immigration aspect of this and what this does to people who are non-citizens, particularly that drugs do have additional consequences for people who are not citizens. In essence, they are doubly punished. Not only are they punished by the criminal system, but they are also punished by either being removed from the country or not allowed to proceed with their immigration case, even if they do have a valid pathway to status. Next, vacating a conviction will not work in an immigration court. Their definition of conviction is different than our state definition, and so it does not fully encompass those consequences for them. They could go into immigration court, and the immigration judge would say, I'm sorry, it doesn't have the magic language. We're still going to count that conviction against you. Third, diversion isn't created equal. Unless there's the magic language that is included that is immigration safe, not all diversion works for people who are non-citizens and sometimes could be a recipe for justice by geography. And last, 5624 will sweep less people into the net, less opportunity for double punishment, leaves pathway opens for people to keep their status or gain status. Thank you.
Thank you. And while we wait for Jason to unmute, on deck is going to be Bob Cooper, Mayor Kelly, Matt McCourt, and Lauren Faringa. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning to you, Senator Dhingra, and other members of the committee. I'm Jason Shores. I'm the director of the Snohomish County Office of Public Defense, and I'm testifying today on behalf of the Washington Defender Association and the Washington Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. These agencies have signed in today in opposition to Senate Bill 5460, opposed to Senate Bill 5035, other on Senate Bill 5536, and in favor of Senate Bill 5624. We oppose the continued use of the criminal legal system and prisons as a means to achieve public health policy. We are supporting Senate Bill 5624 because of its very commitment to community-based treatment. Drug use is a health crisis. It's not a criminal one. And Senate Bill 5624 begins to respond to that medical crisis, and also, importantly, to do so equally throughout the state of Washington. Currently, many citizens of Washington do not have access to sufficient substance use and mental health treatment. PA and WAPTL's concerns with Senate Bill 5536, which we signed in other, is the very absence of investments in community treatment that will ultimately, we feel, undermine the bill's ability to rely on diversion. If we appreciate the use of pretrial diversion, we like that option. We like the option to vacate, but without investment in sufficient community resources, those individuals who are going to be sent to diversion will not be able to access them. And what we're going to end up having is the ability for folks who live in urban areas to get their convictions vacated, and folks in rural areas who do not have access to treatment to have convictions on their record or other legally negative impacts. So we, like Mr. Jefferson said, we want to avoid justice by geography. We want to avoid disparate outcomes by geography. Rural places, there are also fewer public defenders, fewer access to support services to help them resolve their legal processes, which is why we are in support of Senate Bill, the Senate Bill 5624. There's a lot to remember, sorry, and why we signed in other to 5536. Thank you so much. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Bob.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. For the record, Bob Cooper here on behalf of the Washington Association of Drug Courts. And let me say first, Madam Chair, that we completely agree with you that substance use disorder is in and of itself a public health issue. It is not a criminal legal issue. That said, as you meld these bills together in what I assume will be kind of a medley of what's in there, we also believe that this is not going to succeed, however you address this, without planning and funding a much more robust treatment and recovery support regime that addresses substance use disorder overall, and that cannot be zip code dependent. That has to be statewide, and it has to be fully funded. We believe that the sequential intercept model is the appropriate response to the possession of controlled substance. As behaviors escalate, responses escalate, but not at that initial stage where it is simply possession. Drug courts have their place in the system. Courts of limited jurisdiction have their place in the system. We urge that you also continue the funding that you had in the original Blake response with the $21 million that the governor is recommending be employed for courts of limited jurisdiction, while completely appropriating the criminal justice treatment account to fund drug courts as responses escalate. But funding, as much as we've heard today, it comes down to funding, 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 and it cannot be zip code dependent. If you are in Hump Tulips, you have to have the same opportunity for treatment as you have in downtown Seattle. You need to push with your colleagues, funding, funding, funding. This has to be paid for. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to move to Mayor Kelly, followed by Matt McCourt and Lauren Ferringa. Go ahead. Why don't we skip to Matt then?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and all members of the committee. For the record, my name is Matt McCourt. I'm a police officer on a proactive policing unit in Washington State. I've been assigned to this unit since 2017, and we focus on gang, gun, and drug crime. The fact that it's those three things is not by happenstance. I'm also a board member of the Washington State Narcotics Investigators Association and have been since 2017. And today I'm testifying on behalf of them. We have identified two primary opportunities that we might be able to improve Senate Bill 5536. And they address what, Madam Chair, you spoke to earlier, And that is first that oftentimes those that suffer from substance use disorder are arrested for multiple crimes, be it theft, you mentioned criminal trespass, burglary, sometimes violent crimes like robbery or unlawful possession of a firearm. The Senate Bill 5536 doesn't specifically address those situations, and I know the prosecutor spoke to that earlier. It's our stance that there should be something explicit that addresses those instances. Secondly, and I really appreciated what you said earlier about the data-driven approach. I don't think that can be understated enough, and we don't think so. It's imperative that policymakers understand the frequency with which those suffering from substance use disorder are gaining access to treatment and then determining how effective those treatment options are. Obviously, Washington State has a proud history of transparency and public involvement, and if we can legislate the transparency specifically as it pertains to the data, I think that we can find a path forward and continue to fine-tune these policies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Lauren Feringa, if you can come up, and right after her is going to be Malika Lamont and Don Julian. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Lauren Feringa. I'm the founder and director of Hibina Veteran Foundation, as well as the marketing director for all veteran support services out of the Washington National Guard. We all see or are impacted by the issues on the streets, and so it's clear why you guys want to rush this stuff through. However, I want to address a serious flaw, and I guess the one that I signed up to speak on, 5536. If bills like that pass, we're putting the solution to addiction and lots of other mental health issues in along with the same category as the problem. And I'm speaking for those that are wearing uniforms overseas and currently still serving as police officers on our streets that aren't allowed to speak to this for themselves because of the uniforms that they wear. Sorry.
It's okay.
Because I was one of them. And as a combat medic, I had to give up my career after 14 years of service, thanks to the improper classification of cannabis and entheogenic plants like fungi. These are medicines that my grandfather, a professor of Chicano studies who wrote the curriculum on Chicano studies and Chicano gangs, that everybody, anyone that takes a Chicano class right now, gets to read through, as well as my husband. We're both arrested for these medicines, and these plants have been honored as medicine by indigenous peoples and families like mine for millennia. Unfortunately, my spiritual beliefs and cultural traditions aren't recognized in the US, a nation I swore an oath for. In fact, they were exploited and criminalized. In the meantime, legal and expensive trauma therapies for my soldiers include ECT, which is absolutely barbaric. The gentle fungi plant medicines we grow on the ground freely all over the Pacific Northwest, which I'm pretty certain are outside right now, have already been deemed safe for human consumption by the FDA. For this bill to include them amongst the ranks of dangerous and addictive chemicals, such as heroin and meth, is not only inaccurate, it's harmful. Studies since the 1960s have proven that these plant medicines offer a direct and safe solution to the very issues that we are attempting to address. This is something that indigenous peoples have always known and advocated for.
Thank you. Can I please have you wrap up?
It is unethical to ask our police officers to arrest people for the very PTSD treatments that they themselves will be able to access in the coming years. They also won't be able to forget the families that they tear apart, human beings trying to heal their own trauma.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the next two testifiers. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And while we wait for them to come up, we are going to have on deck our next panelists, who will be Judge Ringas and Judge Rivera. Good afternoon. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Malika Lamont, and I am the director of the Lead Washington State Technical Assistance Team, as well as Vocal Washington, and I was a member of the SERSAC committee. I would like to come in as pro for 5624. This bill does what the legislature asked us to do in 2021, which was to build out what a meaningful response would be across the state. And we were told that there were initial investments into that infrastructure, and there was a lot of thought in creating parity around the state, and we have not been able to achieve that in 2 years, but that doesn't mean that we can't do it with more funding and more time. I think that we came in as other on 5536. We appreciate the removal of hindrances to site treatment facilities and the removal of criminal penalties for life-saving testing supplies. However, a gross misdemeanor will not save lives. An increased investment in drug courts that are notoriously biased will only deepen disparity against Black and brown people. No drug court in the whole state can demonstrate through published data that they meaningfully include people of color. Prosecutorial diversion programs are useful. However, we need to have pre-booking diversion also available for folks, because not everybody, arrest is harmful. Arrest is traumatizing, and increasing the depth of generational trauma is not going to help us in addressing the substance use crisis that we have. I also would like to add that homelessness is the main driver of public consumption of substances, and increased funding urinalysis and treatment does not address homelessness, but the recommendations that came out of the SERSAC do have recommendations directly related to that, and people that use drugs do not determine the drug supply, they use what is in the drug supply. Cartels determine that. So continuing to deeply penalize people that are suffering substance use disorder does not address the fentanyl crisis that we're experiencing in our communities, and that is what is driving overdose death.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Don Julian Saucier, and I was formerly incarcerated for a drug problem. I am on the SERSAC committee as well, and as a person with lived experience. And a couple of points I just want to make sure that we point out is, and Malika kind of started on that, was that going to jail is a traumatic experience. And most people that are using substances have some sort of trauma that they're coping with or self-medicating for. And it's clear that adding trauma to trauma does not help trauma. It doesn't help solve the problem, the root causes. We need to allow people an opportunity to address the root causes and not add other consequences to them where they get stopped and they can't continue to work, they can't continue to live in their homes, they can't continue to have a life with, when they're being charged with a drug possession charge. It's time that we use a little more compassion and understanding that people just don't do drugs for the sake of doing drugs to be counter to things. They find some sort of relief in them and whatever they're dealing with. And when you are criminalizing an individual and adding that stigma and adding those burdens of a conviction, it sticks with people and it just adds hurdles and I think that's why there's so much recidivism and all that goes on. So that's what I'd like to say for now. I got more, but.
Thank you so much, and you're always welcome to submit written testimony.
Okay.
And with that, we're going to go to Judge Ringas, followed by Judge Rivera. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kevin Ringas. I am the judge in Fife Municipal Court. I'm also here on behalf of the District and Municipal Court Judges Association. The policies expressed in these pieces of legislation focus on implementing accountability and encouraging therapeutic intervention when necessary. The district and municipal courts around the state focus on these goals with each case on a daily basis. District and municipal courts adjudicate and monitor cases of impaired driving, theft, vehicle prowling, criminal trespass, domestic violence, many of which include components of substance abuse, mental or behavioral health issues. And we thank the legislature for your support of our efforts with therapeutic courts for those who are ready to seek help. Prior to Blake, there were roughly just over 20 therapeutic courts in the district and municipal court level. Since your gracious funding of therapeutic courts at district municipal court level. There are over 70, and we are offering these types of interventions to those who are willing. However, each individual and each situation lends differently to accountability and intervention. For instance, the deferred prosecution law has been on the books for decades, yet it's often petitioned for or used. As you've heard, efforts to increase the resources available to those in need of substance abuse, mental health, and or behavioral health intervention and in every geographical area of our state will decrease this notion of justice by geography. Continued funding of therapeutic courts and therapeutic interventions for the district and municipal courts will continue to provide intervention and accountability for persons charged with any crime, including drug possession. Again, thank you for the funding and the time you have provided me today and in recent years. This funding has allowed each district and municipal court to address its criminal justice needs with accountability, flexibility, and intervention. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Do we have Stephanie available next? And on deck, if we could please have, sorry, excuse me one moment. Well, maybe we could just call Stephanie up to testify. Sorry, staff, do we have someone else on deck? Excuse me, I had to take over really quick for Senator Dhingra. Oh, great, thank you.
Hi, this is Judge Rivera. I think I might have been after Judge Ringus.
Okay, my apologies. Judge Ringus, please proceed.
Hi, everyone. I would say Chair Dhingra, but I guess she has left. Members of the committee, I'm Judge Whitney Rivera. I'm the judge in Edmonds Municipal Court. Prior to taking the bench in 2020, I was a public defender for 14 years, so have a lot of experience interacting with people with substance use disorder. Also, growing up, I had an older brother who struggled with substance use disorder for the better part of 10 years, so I have a lot of personal experiences with that as well. I just wanted to make some overarching comments about the importance of therapeutic interventions in our district and municipal courts. You know, post-Blake, cases involving substance use disorder are still happening in our courtrooms every day. Even if they're not specifically charged as possession cases, we see them as part of theft cases, vehicle prowling, criminal trespass, domestic violence, and we're working in the district and municipal courts every day to try and find individualized solutions to address the individual in front of us, the whole person in front of us, to increase community safety and help address the underlying issues that cause that person to become court involved. Judge Ring has talked about the grant funding for therapeutic courts in the district and municipal courts. My court was a recipient of some of that grant funding through AOC. We regularly partner with nonprofit organizations and other government entities to bring services and resources to our court calendars. So an individual who appears at the Edmonds Municipal Court Community Court has access to someone from County Human Services, has availability of grocery delivery directly through our local food bank, gets assistance with scheduling substance use disorder evaluations, mental health evaluations, any other services that individual may need, as well as transportation assistance for getting to appointments and court dates to make sure that they follow through with accessing those resources. On behalf of DMCJ, I just want to applaud the legislation that focuses on encouraging therapeutic interventions for those struggling with substance use disorders and encourage the ongoing funding of the resources those people need to address those underlying issues. So we'd like to just support continuing incentivizing district and municipal courts across the state to develop and implement these programs, which allow the courts to address these needs for people who become court involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Did I miss, staff, did I miss somebody that's
Samantha Louderback is up next, and then after her would be Everett Maroon, Adam Palayu, and Jude Ahmed.
Thank you so much. And Samantha, I think that was my fault. I was calling for a Stephanie and it was a Samantha, so if you'll forgive me, I appreciate your grace. Please proceed. Do we have Samantha with us? Okay. If not, then we'll move on to the next in line to testify. If staff could please call them forward.
Everett Maroon.
Go ahead. Please start. So Everett's not here. The next person is Adam.
Hello, thank you. Hello, my name is Adam Paliu. I'm a PhD student at UW in epidemiology who studies drug regulation, and I'm an expert in epidemiology and drugs. I've also lost too many friends and loved ones to drug overdoses and other drug-related harms. I've seen firsthand the devastating effects that drugs can have on individuals, and I take the harms of drugs very seriously. However, I also take the harms of our drug laws very seriously. The iron law of prohibition states that as drug prohibition becomes more severe, the potency of banned substances tends to increase. This is because drug producers aim to maximize the value of their product and minimize the risk of detection and confiscation. As a result, the drug supply becomes more dangerous. The reason people are currently dying in record numbers has less to do with addiction, as SAMHSA data shows that the vast majority of people who use drugs do not, but mostly because our current drug supply is unpredictable, dangerous, and poisonous. A regulated supply of drugs would provide individuals with access to a supply of drugs of known potency and quality. This has been shown to reduce the risk of harms associated with street drugs. Evidence in Canada and Switzerland have shown that these strategies greatly reduce the number of deaths, as well as other positive benefits, such as people committing less crime and being more likely to find and maintain stable employment. While regulation of the drug supply can reduce the harms associated with drug use, it is important to be cautious about how this regulation is implemented. The case of Purdue Pharma is a clear example of the dangers of this. Purdue Pharma and other companies aggressively marketed drugs and downplayed their potential for misuse. These actions have had devastating consequences for communities across the state. However, the current approach to our drug policy can be compared to the failed experiment of alcohol prohibition in the early 20th century. Just as alcohol prohibition led to a rise in organized crime, decrease in public safety, the black market for drugs, and the accompanying violence, the criminalization of drugs has created a similar situation today. The analogy of alcohol prohibition serves as a reminder that the criminalization of drugs has been tried before and has been shown to be ineffective and harmful. This is why Senate Bill 5624 and especially the Safe Supply Working Group are important. This group will work with community organizers, healthcare providers, and law enforcement to discuss the nuances of providing a regulated safe supply of drugs in the safest manner for our community, so that we can save the lives of so many people that we love and care for, and allow people the opportunity of one of the founding promises of this country, that of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you, the committee, for my testimony.
Thank you. And while we wait for Jude to unmute herself, we're going to follow that by David Larson and Michael Transit. Go ahead, Jude.
Thank you, Chair Dhingra and members of the Law and Justice Committee. My name is Jude Ahmed. I'm the advocacy organizer representing the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle and the Tacoma Urban League, and I'll be testifying pro on Senate Bill 5624 and con on 5536, 5035, and 5467. The Urban League's mission is to empower and uplift the Black community through economic parity and empowerment. Our services include providing and finding houses for families in need, career development, job training, and access to healthcare services. Our clients include community members with criminal convictions or those dealing with substance abuse. And through connecting disparities within our community as more than just statistics, we know those most vulnerable by name. We believe that addressing the social determinants of health and helping community members meet their basic needs, we can uplift them out of cycles of poverty and violence. Senate Bill 5624 best addresses the overlapping issues of social equity, community reinvestment, criminal justice, public health, product safety, and quality control. However, policies like Senate Bill 5536 and especially 5035 and 5467 that punitively address drug use result in increased and racially disproportionate police contacts in our community and make it more difficult to access services, housing, and jobs. This is often due to criminal convictions and trauma that saddle our community members with a lifelong opportunity. According to a study in the Harm Reduction Journal by Zhang et al., the traditional policing approach, which typically involves prosecution and arrest for drug use-related crime, was associated with the risk of future fatal overdose and notable increases in the incarceration rate and average incarceration per person. We resist any efforts to criminalize our unhoused neighbors or increase punitive and inhumane drug policies that perpetuate cycles of violence for our community members dealing with addiction. Our lawmakers must listen to those with lived experience and experts from the Substance Use Recovery Services Advisory Committee by adopting the recommendations to decriminalize drug possession and increase investment in public health alternatives for people with substance use disorder. I urge the committee to adopt the SURSOC recommendations in Senate Bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Judge Larson. Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes, it is afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you. I'm for Federal Municipal Court. I always say I run a repair shop, not a junkyard. My job is to make lives better. I have to separate the cans from the wounds. The people that really need help, we need to get them help. I'm here not in support of opposition of any of the bills. I'm here to just bring an alarm bell that if we don't fix our architecture, our structure, that anything we do is not going to have the meaningful results that we'd like. I very much think we need to institutionalize early intervention and institutionalize the sequential intercept model. And thank you very much for the grant money from 5476. We did get some of that. Let me just tell you what we've done with peers in our court, with peer support. It's barrier-free. Anybody that comes to court can interact with a peer. We have peers at every stage of the proceeding, the sequential intercept model. Even our police department refers through the Blake referrals, refers through peers. I'll tell you a story, a real life impact with people because it's about prevention too. I had a person on my infraction calendar. She was a single mother, 15-month-old child. Her husband had died in front of her eyes. I didn't ask if it was suicide, drug overdose, or whatever when her child was 2 months old. She's working 2 jobs. She's going crazy. She can only see her kid 3 days a week. She's on an infraction calendar. I set her up with a peer for mental health care that she needed. She had a previous criminal history. One of the things when I addressed the drug court conference in October, I asked, are you willing to live with the success you'll never know about? Because if we can give people intervention that's barrier-free, I think we can prevent a lot of things that we'll never see. We'll never know our success. But I think we have to get a lot more intentional, and the sequential intercept model is the answer. It's there. I didn't invent it. It's there for us to use. We're using it in an informal way, in federal way. But like I said, early intervention and the sequential intercept model have to be institutionalized, or anything where it's like putting out a fire right in front of, putting out the little fire in front of us and the forest fire is burning behind our back. Okay, I just can't tell you how grateful I am for the opportunity to address you, and I hope that you take to heart what I've said, because it's something. I retire in 2 years, 10 months. Let's see. Just a moment. I got it up here, I think. 2 years, 10 months, 25 days, 3 hours, 51 minutes, and 55 seconds from now. So I want this to be a reality by then.
Thank you, Judge Larson.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good day.
Go ahead, Michael. And then our last panel is going to be Mayor Naring, Mayor Woodards, and Celia Jackson.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michael Trance, and I'm here today testifying on behalf of the 3,300 members of the Washington State Fraternal Order of Police, testifying other on Senate Bill 5467 in support of Senate Bill 5536. Let me start by saying both of those bills are steps in the right direction from our perspective. They address what we believe are the 3 necessary elements that must be included in any flex to the Blake decision, and those are consequences, treatment, and accountability. We're other on 5467 only because we feel that it engages the judicial branch a little bit too early and too heavily, and will probably be too costly on local governments. It prioritizes a little bit too much on the conviction side, and then a vacation when after the conviction is done. We're supportive of Senate Bill 5536 because we feel it better reflects and appropriately balances those 3 pillars I just mentioned. As such, we think it will do a better job of achieving the goal of keeping people out of the criminal justice system through its proposed pretrial diversion program. We also support the proposed expansion of access to substance disorder treatment programs in rural and underserved areas, and we believe that the approach is preferable to booking individuals arrested for simple possession. Finally, we believe the opportunity to have a conviction vacated will provide a meaningful incentive for completion of these treatment programs. Regardless of the final approach that you take, one thing we would like the committee to consider is the establishment of a statewide database so that officers across the state can assess details as to whether or not an individual has completed the required treatment. You heard several testifiers today mention that database and that tracking system, and we would strongly suggest that anything that comes out of the committee makes reference to such a system. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that. And we're going to go to Cecilia Jackson. And just a reminder, Mayor Woodard, you have to accept the prompt to be a panelist. Go ahead, Celia.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Celia Jackson. I am the Director of Criminal Legal System Transformation in the Office of the King County Executive. Testifying in support of Senate Bill 5536 while recognizing there's still much work to be done on the bill as we address an issue that has impacted many across the state. Overdoses continue to skyrocket in our community. About 3 a day occur in King County, but substance use disorder is a treatable health condition. And to address this terrifying growth in lethal drug use, we must remain steadfast in our state's commitment to a healthcare-based response to substance use. Since the Blake decision, we have taken tremendous strides to shift away from a criminal and carceral-based remedy to drug use, and we ask that this shift to a post-Blake public health approach is one we don't take. War on drugs and the criminalization of individuals that use drugs have been deeply ineffective at addressing the root causes of substance use. It had tremendously disproportionate impact on communities of color. While King County does not support full recriminalization, we ask that any language regarding recriminalization the legislature may consider be amended to have a mandatory pre-booking diversion requirement. We urge the legislature to continue to invest in evidence-based solutions that help people who use substances and not regress back to a failed war on drugs, which is little more than a war on our most vulnerable communities. We look forward to working on Senate Bill 5536 on the weeks to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're going to end with both of our mayors, starting first with Mayor Naring.
Thank you, Madam Chair Dhingra and Ranking Member Padden and the members of the committee. For the record, my name is John Naring, Mayor of Marysville here in Snohomish County. I also serve on the steering committee for mayors and business leaders for public safety, which is a bipartisan group of 16 Snohomish County mayors, as well as local private sector business leaders who have united around finding solutions to our public safety challenges. I do support Senate Bill 5536 because it will take a significant step toward addressing substance abuse issues in our communities around the state. I want to commend two specific elements of this bill. First, SB 5536 reestablishes accountability to the system so that law enforcement can take enforcement actions for simple possession of drugs, classifying possession of a controlled substance as a gross misdemeanor. Blake removed this key provision, and we support its reinstatement. Perhaps most importantly, SB 5536 addresses the need for treatment and provides incentives for those who need it. Under Blake, there is no incentive for a drug user to enter treatment. Senate Bill 5536 creates a pretrial diversion program for individuals charged with possession of prohibited substances. As a result, individuals will have a choice, jail time or drug treatment. And upon successful completion of a treatment program, the drug possession conviction would be vacated. These are the kind of options we need to help people into treatment so that they can reclaim their lives. And these have been proven successful in communities like ours that have successfully graduated well over 150 individuals from drug treatment, most of that coming because there were consequences if they didn't accept it. I want to thank Senator Robinson for her work on this issue and for bringing forward positive solutions in Senate Bill 5536. I also appreciate the work of Senator Salomon and Padden around their respective bills. And please support Senate Bill 5536 and give communities like Marysville and so many others the tools we need to help solve this important issue. Thank you so much for hearing the testimony.
Thank you. And finishing us all off, Mayor Woodard.
Good afternoon, committee, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. Good morning, Chair Dhingra, Ranking Member Padden, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our own Senator Yasmin Trudeau and all committee members. I am honored to be the mayor of Tacoma, Washington. And I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 5536. And I also want to thank Senator Robinson. Tacoma City Council recently discussed the current status of possession of controlled substances offenses and our state law following the State versus Blake case. Our council feels very strongly that a conviction for possession of a controlled substance on a person's record is not the right way to deal with substance use disorder. Criminalizing drug possession has had a disproportionate impact on people of color. The war on drugs have led to higher arrest rates and incarceration, including for simple possession, with some of the most egregious racial disparities being seen in the cases of Black and Latinx people. We believe that House Bill 5536 strikes a balance between public safety and being able to ensure that a person is able to avoid having a conviction on their record by completing needed treatment. We prefer the approach in House Bill 5536 because it creates a diversion program that does not require a conviction. Instead, it allows a person to have a charge dismissed by successfully completing the treatment. While we support this House bill, we also have a few priorities and amendments. Because the prosecution and services required under the bill would fall to the cities, we ask that the legislature fully fund the services needed to ensure there is access to the treatment needed. We also request that there be continued opportunity for local input and control into the location of treatment facilities, particularly to allow the city the ability to ensure there is not a concentration of facilities in areas with greater disparities. While we may have other suggestions, we will submit those, but thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and please pass House Bill 5536. Our communities need it, our businesses need it, and certainly our law enforcement officers need it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. And with that, we're going to close public hearing on Senate Bill 5536, Senate Bill 5467, Senate Bill 5035, Senate Bill 5620. I would encourage everyone to take a look at the written testimony as well as the number of people signed in not testifying. And with that, the Law and Justice Committee for February 6th is adjourned.